So, nice to see you all. Thank you all for coming tonight. And yes, this is the last talk in our series on the Dhammapada. And I'm going to be talking about, or talk based on a set of 5 verses, which you actually heard last week from Jinamati, but she didn't really go into them. And this is what we're going into tonight. So I'm going to read, just a couple of people settling down. I'm going to read the verses as a starting point. If anyone wants to look this up, this is from the chapter The Enlightened one, verses 10 to 14 in that chapter. Many people, out of fear, flee for refuge to sacred hills, woods, groves, trees, and shrines. In reality, this is not a safe refuge. In reality, this is not the best refuge. Fleeing to such a refuge, one is not released from all suffering. One who goes for refuge to the Enlightened One, to the truth, and to the spiritual community, and who sees with perfect wisdom the 4 Aryan truths, namely suffering, the origin of suffering, the passing beyond suffering, and the Aryan 8-fold way leading to the pacification of suffering. For them, this is a safe refuge. This is the best refuge. Having gone to such a refuge, one is released from all suffering. So those are the verses. Actually, let's have the first 2 again. Many people out of fear flee for refuge to sacred hills, woods, groves, trees, and shrines. In reality, this is not a safe refuge. In reality, this is not the best refuge. Fleeing to such a refuge, one is not released from all suffering. So that can sound a little bit odd for us in our modern era. We probably don't go to sacred hills and woods and shrines and so on very much. It can sound a little bit sort of superstitious maybe. And there's also that word fear, which can give an impression of something very dramatic, like there's someone around with a gun or something like that. But of course, fear is much more ubiquitous than that. Anyway, it can sound a little bit sort of, what's that got to do with us? So I'm going to offer you a sort of modern equivalent. Many people, out of insecurity, flee for refuge to sacred careers, pension funds, penthouse apartments, partners, foreign holidays, and new iPads. In reality, this is not a safe refuge. In reality, this is not the best refuge. Fleeing to such a refuge, one is not released from all suffering. Okay, so I just made that up, as you can probably tell. Important to say, so in that original reading, the Buddha's not saying that it's bad to go to sacred shrines, trees, groves, and so on. He's not saying you shouldn't do that. He's just saying doesn't really work. It's not really a safe place. You're not going to be released from suffering. You're not going to find real safety through doing that. So in talking about careers, pension funds, apartments, blah, 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 partners, I'm not saying those are bad things. What we're talking about tonight is our tendency to try and make things into refuges, i.e. into places that will give us complete safety, security, and satisfaction. So that's the territory here, a refuge as in a place that's genuinely safe. We got quite a storm out there tonight, haven't we? Very, very windy, and we don't want to be sort of trying to take refuge just behind a few sort of branches of a tree. That's probably not going to work very well. So yeah, and this issue has got quite an existential dimension to it. So I just want to try and evoke that, and I guess we'll come back to it. So here we are with this wrong idea that there's a little me in here that's separate from all the world, from all our experience out there. There's this massive universe, and there's this little me in the middle of it, which is, that's scary, you know. There's fear in that. Most of the time it's very subtle, but there's fear in that separation out between ourselves and the world around us. Yeah, so it's a bit scary being us in this big universe that a lot of the time doesn't cooperate with what we want and what makes us feel safe. I mean, that's true even on a mundane level, isn't it? So there's old age, sickness, and death. And one strategy that in our modern world we have, of course, is to try to accumulate money to make us feel safe in relation to old age and sickness and to some extent death. And yeah, it's not entirely ineffective, but it doesn't give us real safety. And even on a mundane level, especially these days, I mean, money, what is it? You know, it's just some numbers in a database somewhere. That's a lot of what our money is actually. How real is that? Yeah, okay, we can have reasonable confidence in it, but it's not ultimately safe. Don't want to make you nervous, but yeah, that's the truth of the matter. We can't completely rely on anything material. Yeah. So even if there was a magic wand waved that meant that somehow material things did give us lasting security on their own level, you know, even if the rules of condition co-production were broken in that way, well, we still wouldn't be entirely safe because there's this deeper level on which we're still separated out and not in control. We're not in control of our own minds most of the time. And that's, I think there's something fundamentally scary about that. I mean, so here I am giving a talk, and there's a little bit of me that's quite nervous. Sort of, how's this going to land? Is this going to be over people's heads, or going to seem, a bit too sort of removed from people's experience? And what? So there's a bit of me that's kind of worried about, how you're going to receive it. And that's because I've got this sense of myself as kind of separate from everything and needing to be protected. And it's a scary thing to give a talk. Well, only a little bit these days, but it is. Actually, it's pretty scary in anticipation, but not so much when I'm actually doing it. So yeah, what do we turn to? This is the question I'm going to be exploring really tonight. What do we turn to when we don't feel entirely safe? So here's a few things that I turn to. Many Samudraghoshas, out of inner discomfort, flee for refuge to sacred novels, newspaper articles, pieces of cake, and puzzle games. In reality, this is not a safe refuge. In reality, this is not the best refuge. Fleeing to such a refuge, he is not released from all suffering. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about puzzle games, kind of. So, I was talking sort of Sudoku type stuff on, I've recently got into sort of various games of that type on my smartphone. Very bad idea to get started on that, but I have. And yeah, it's got a positive side actually. It can, up to a point, be a bit of fun, provide a certain type of intellectual stimulation. And there are times when actually we need to take a break from what's troubling us. There is some value to that. It just doesn't work as a longer term strategy. So yeah, there's a positive side to that. It's not that it's a bad thing and I shouldn't be doing it. Let's come back to that. But of course, what often triggers it is maybe I'm a bit tired and there's something a bit uncomfortable going on in my experience, like I've got a talk to prepare. And I don't really want to be with that. I don't really want to sort of look at that. So, oh, well, let's do this. I'm probably not even aware often that's what's going on. And when it becomes a problem is when it becomes more of a continued avoidance, and it can be a bit of a compulsive element in it. And then what happens is I start to get sort of a bit fed up with myself. Kind of, oh God, what am I doing? Spending all this time doing this, it's, and this is now something else coming into play. So refuges, let's come back to I'll come back to that personal story, but yeah, refuges. So another type of refuge is ideas. Yeah. So we go to refuge to ideas. We attach to all sorts of ideas because that gives us a sense of what's going on. Yeah, up to a point it's necessary. Yeah, so yeah, it comes into politics a lot, just ideas about how things are, who's good and who's bad, all that sort of thing. But then, of course, there's ideas about us. Yeah, we get attached to ideas about who we are. And that, again, that's giving us a sense of identity, a sense of who we are. And up to a point, it's a good thing. Yeah. When in this talk, I'm talking about transcending it, but we do need something of a positive sense of ourselves to begin with. The trouble is we get attached to these ideas of who we are and try and define ourselves by them. I mean, this can happen with, this can cause problems with retirement. So someone's been doing a career for a long time and they've built up a very solid sort of sense of identity of who they are in relation to their work. And then they retire, and I believe it can be a really insecure thing, because that thing that's given us a sense of who we are and what our life's about is no longer there. So we can derive a lot of, we can try to go for refuge to an idea of who we are. Actually, it can even be a negative and painful idea of who we are. So I'm going to come back to the puzzles thing, but another personal example. So some weeks ago, one evening, I had an experience that I'm not going to try and describe. That it wasn't very dramatic, but I had quite an expansive sense of myself. It was a very positive experience, actually, a very confidence-giving at the time, and positive experience. Felt sort of a lot bigger in a way. And again, nothing dramatic. The next day, I noticed I was feeling quite uncomfortable. I may well have turned to my puzzle games, I can't remember. And it took quite some time before I realized, oh, it's like that was a different experience of myself, a sort of a bigger, more experience of myself. And it's pretty unfamiliar. It was a bit scary. So actually, I think I'd rather be this small me that I'm more comfortable and familiar with. So that's something else we can do. Actually, we can escape to something that's smaller and more comfortable, because yeah, it's more familiar. Okay, let me go back to the puzzle games. So yeah, what can happen is, so here I am, I'm an order member, and I'm helping to teach the Dharma, and I'm spending all this time doing this thing, which is sort of thing that I might have done when I was about 12 years old, and so I can get into this whole thing about, oh, I'm not good enough, and I'm sort of I'm failing, and I should be better than this, and actually, whilst there might be a little something in that, it's actually, it's a guilt trip, and it's coming from an attachment to an idea of who I should be and a rejection of the other bit of me that's kind of coming up. And then, of course, that's uncomfortable, which then means I don't want to experience that, so I want to escape from it. So a cycle can kind of happen. So I hope this isn't a bit too sort of, yeah, This is quite full on, perhaps, but I hope this is sort of familiar. We do it in different ways. It could even happen in a meditation and gets distracted, and then we can get into a thing about the fact that we got distracted, and that is uncomfortable. It's a hard thing to be with. Anyway, I don't want to dwell too much on that. The point is that, in a way, there's two refuges going on there. There's the game, and then there's my idea about who I should be. And in a positive sense, want to be, but there's an attachment there, yeah, and a rejection of another side of myself. So what do we do? What do we do with this sort of thing? Well, the Buddha, in a way, has been very clear. Where is that verse? One who goes to refuge to the enlightened one, to the truth and to the spiritual community, and who sees with perfect wisdom the four Aryan truths, the four noble truths. This is a safe refuge. So, yeah, in a way, it's easy. What we do is we go for refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Okay, but in practice, we can't just push away our craving, which is what we're talking about here. We can't just push away our attachment, our pull towards refuges that aren't really going to work. Because if we're doing that, we're probably doing it because we're the same sort of thing I've just been talking about. Yeah, so in my description of the puzzle games sort of scenario, and this is something I've repeated a number of times, yeah, on the one hand, there's this refuge, which is, yeah, a limited but not particularly harmful distraction. And on the other hand, there's an idea that I'm attached to, which sort of looks a bit like three jewels. Oh, I should be, you know, meditating or studying the Dharma or something. But actually, as I say, it's attachment to an idea that's going on there. It's not actually Shraddha, it's not actually my response from the heart to the three jewels. So what do we do? Well, this is actually a really rich and complex topic, and not one I can fully do justice to in a short time this evening. But first principle of Buddhism, probably awareness, yeah, mindfulness. And yeah, can we turn towards the discomfort that we're actually trying to escape from? Sometimes actually we don't have the resources to do that just yet, and we need a little bit of distraction, but we mustn't let that go on too long. You know, we need to actually turn towards what's actually going on here. What do I actually feel? What is the discomfort here? Just feeling into it. I don't mean analysing even, just in the body if we can. Can we feel that? Is there that nervousness in the chest, tension in the shoulders, whatever? But then there's also awareness of the craving. So for me, I've realised, yeah, it's actually useful to go into, well, why is there's attraction to this game? It's useful to go into that and get a sense of, oh yeah, there's a sense of wanting fun and a sense of wanting a sense of mastery. But it's also kind of, I want to experience that other thing. More importantly, actually, for me, in this scenario, it's important to go into the other thing, yeah? Why is there this, you shouldn't be doing this kind of story going on? And yeah, it's important to bring awareness for me to that. And actually, whereas it's actually really quite a painful thing to be doing. It doesn't mean that I could just go off and spend my whole day playing on the phone. That's not the point here. The point is that there's a suffering in that judgment that needs awareness. And of course, it also needs kindness. It needs metta. Yeah. So those are things that we can do. We can bring awareness to our craving, whatever it is. Really try and feel into it, what's actually going on. And if we're trying to escape from something, which is usually happening, probably always, we can try and feel into that. What is it that's uncomfortable that I don't want to experience here? Something else we can do that's incredibly helpful is talking to friends who will understand this point of view, this kind of point of view. So friends in the Sangha, especially people who are perhaps more experienced than us, and really sort of being honest about, well, we can do this with any friend actually, this bit, being honest about what it is that we get up to and what it is that we crave, what we try and set up as a refuge. And we find, oh, actually we're not alone, and it's kind of normal, and actually that can help us work with it more creatively. And our friends, of course, if they know something about the Dharma, especially if they've got more perspective than we have, they can help us work with whatever's going on for us. Something else we can do is we can take positive action. That sounds like discipline. I mentioned discipline as well. That wasn't what I meant, but I mentioned discipline. Yeah, it can be useful, obviously, to be disciplined. If we've got something, particularly if we're really addicted to something, then it can be helpful to be disciplined, to really be clear. No, this amount, no more. Sometimes maybe it's better just to stop completely, but let's not make this too complicated. Discipline, there's a role for that. But again, what's the motivation? Where are we coming from in that? Okay, positive action. So here's another little example. So Sunday I'd spent some time on one of these said games, back to those again. And I had a chapter meeting in the evening. So for those of you who are not familiar with that, so this is a group of order members who regularly gather together, normally once a week, and really go into what's going on for them in their life and in their practice. And so I had a chapter meeting, and there weren't very many of us, and I noticed myself sort of thinking, oh, I hope this finishes early and get back to my game. Yeah. So there was a desire for not too long a chapter meeting, but then I'd actually done it and I'd gone. There was no question about that, really. And what happened was the positive experience of really engaging with my friends in the chapter and really communicating with them just brought something else out. Well, it connected me with Shraddha, with the three jewels. And therefore, of course, the game didn't matter anymore. Yeah. So that's something else we can do. It's really, really important that we keep doing things that put us back in touch with our inspiration, our positive motivation for living a spiritual life. Because the more we do that, and again, I'm talking about doing what will inspire us, the more we do that, the less of a hold other things will actually have on us. Our whole mindset changes when we're inspired. It's not just a temporary, well, it's temporary, but it's not just an emotional experience. It changes the way we see things. Okay, so I'm coming to the last part of this talk. I've got a little bit left, but before I do that, I want to summarize what we've done so far. So we've been talking about refuges, yeah? We're talking about this tendency to set up things that we want to make into refuges. We call them false refuges sometimes, but actually they don't provide real safety. They don't provide real security. And I've been exploring, craving to distractions, things we want to use to escape from our discomfort. And I've also talked a little bit about ideas, a particular attachment to ideas about ourselves. Negative ideas about ourselves we can get attached to, and positive ideas about ourselves we can get attached to. Either way, the attachment's not helpful and it can cause problems, though it's natural as well, of course. So, and then we talked about things we can do in this area, bringing awareness, bringing metta, being open with our friends, being honest, and doing something positive that connects us with our inspiration. There are other things I'm sure we could add to that list. So the last part of this, I want to talk just a little bit about another word from that original verse. And this is the word safe, a safe refuge. For those of you who are interested, the Pali is kema, Khema. It's not a word we use much. So a safe place. So it evokes the sense of a place of comfort, doesn't it? Yeah? A safe place is somewhere nice, yeah, where you can be sort of warm and yeah, the windows are all nicely sealed against the storm outside and so on. That's what that word evokes. But well, the Buddha says safety comes from the Four Noble Truths, and of course that's all about letting go. Yeah, the cessation of suffering comes from the cessation of craving, letting go. Whoa, is that safe? And many of you will know the Heart Sutra. So a line from the Heart Sutra. So know that the Bodhisattva, holding to nothing whatever, but dwelling in prajna, wisdom, is freed of delusive hindrance, rid of the fear bred by it, and reaches clearest nirvana. So rid of the fear, that's safety, isn't it? Free from fear. But to do it, holding to nothing whatever. Wow. A safe is a place where we lock things up, isn't it? Yeah? And actually, that's kind of our situation. We're kind of locked up in a cage of our own creation. The keys are actually back there in the corner. You know, we come into contact with the Dharma. The keys are there. Okay, they might need a bit of refining and so on, a bit of help in how to do that. But the keys are there. We're trying to make this area over here comfortable. And actually, in doing so, we're adding bars to the cage. And letting go is something that, in a way, if we can do that, or to the extent to which we can do that, it means we're already out of the cage and there's nothing that needs feeling safe, actually. So it's very interesting, this word safe. It doesn't really do justice to what we're talking about, which is freedom. So I'm going to finish by reading a very short poem. This is a poem that it's by Rumi, but it's one which I heard from Jnanavacha in a talk that he gave. It's a very short poem. I'm only going to read it once, and I'll pause just briefly before and then a little bit longer afterwards. Okay, it's a short poem to conclude. It doesn't have a title. The way of love is not a subtle argument. The door there is devastation. Birds make great sky circles of their freedom. How do they learn it? They fall, and falling are given wings. Okay, so I'm going to give you a question now and a couple of minutes to reflect on that before going into groups. There'll still be a fair bit of time for the groups. So the question is the obvious one. What sorts of things do you tend to take as refuges? What do you look for safety and security in your life? Of any type. It could be refuges from discomfort or things that you rely on for security on a longer term. And then, of course, you could discuss, well, to what extent is that a safe refuge? Are there any in particular that you would like to let go of? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to reflect on that before the groups.